Hello and welcome to another episode of the Unexpected Entrepreneur Podcast. Today we are back with one of our past clients, Adriana, and we are going to talk all about the rebrand experience. So before we jump into everything, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Totally. So, like Jessie said, my name is Adriana. My business is Adriana Maya Photography. I'm a wedding and elopement photographer, and recently now I am based in Denver, Colorado. So excited to be here, chat with you more, Jessie.
I'm so excited to talk, and it's so excited moving. We move all the time, so like anytime anyone moves, we're like, yes, we're not the only ones, but we love Denver. It's such a cool place to be, and there's so many like fun people around, and so much fun stuff to just like do all around the state. So it's one of our favorite places to be.
Definitely. I love that you guys are like, yes, all about moving. Love it. This will be like my first kind of move as a business owner, too. So it's been interesting kind of like navigating that, too.
Yeah, it definitely. Sometimes we're like, maybe we shouldn't move as much as we move. It's not the easiest thing to always do, but yeah, it's definitely a fun experience once you get settled and all the like craziness is actually done.
Definitely. I feel like I'm in that like era where you're really excited to move, but you're also just like so overwhelmed by everything. So I was excited to have Inkpot like handle some of the business stuff for me so I could focus on other things.
No, absolutely. So speaking of that, when we're looking at your brand and website, what were you kind of feeling beforehand? Was there anything that was like, okay, this is the time I need to do this, or anything that kind of came up that you were like, this feels like the right time to do this?
Definitely. The last sort of branding and website that I had, it was done by another designer, but I felt like I had maybe outgrown it a little bit. I felt like I wanted a little bit more of my personality, a little bit more lightness kind of in the branding overall. And I also just wanted to make sure that when I did make that move that, all the SEO was good, all the keywords were there, and I was working with somebody who could really make sure that all those things were kind of taken care of. So it was really just like I was looking for a little refresh, a new style, a little bit more me, a little bit more personality. So when I was thinking about, who to kind of go with, I think Inkpot was definitely like my number one choice for that.
We love it. And it is
Yeah.
such a good thing when it comes to, SEO, and especially when you are moving or like switching niches or whatever it might be, having that little bit of like, okay, what do I need to do to like actually make sure I'm still attracting the right clients with like my brand and my personality, but then also making sure that everything on the back end is working to, attract those same types of people. So we have
Mhm.
to deal with it all the time moving back and forth. We sometimes try to just avoid saying anything because we are online, so it works, but like every once in a while we're like, we still have Denver in like our bio and all of these things, and like maybe we should just
Yeah.
not say a location because it's hard. But no, that's a good, everyone is kind of at that point where sometimes it's like things just feel a little, they're not bad, and it's not that it's not working, but I feel like it could be a little more me. And I think especially today, having more personality and more of your own values and everything ingrained within your business is so important, and it's like what people are looking for. So we always love when we can kind of pull that a little more and like bring more of that into any brand and website.
Definitely. Yeah.
Before this point, had you kind of been doing it everything on your own? Had you kind of worked with anyone before? What was your kind of situation with your brand and website?
So it was a little bit of both. I definitely started like most photographers, kind of like DIYing it mostly, doing it all yourself. When I originally started my business, I was doing food and like restaurant kind of e-commerce photography, and I kind of pivoted into weddings. But even when I did like food photography, I was still DIYing my website, and I found it super difficult. I feel like my brain just doesn't quite work in that way. Took me so long to make sure that like things were aligned and that fonts were matching and everything was same size and all that. And it took me so long and it was so painful, but I'm happy and excited that now I'm at the point in my business where I can work with a designer and I can actually like trust people who know what they're doing and who are skilled
Mhm.
and whose brains kind of work like that. So it was definitely a lot of DIY. I worked with one previous designer, and then afterwards, I just couldn't wait to work with Inkpod. So that's kind of like where I was with everything.
No, we're huge proponents on like, especially when you're first starting out, like doing, templated stuff, having that while you're figuring out who you are and what you want to do and where you want to be, and what your kind of space is in this world. It's so beneficial because it gives you that little bit of flexibility, like play around and not feel like, okay, I have to stick with this because I invested all this money in it, so I can't change my mind now. When like realistically, sometimes the best things you can do in business is change your mind and be like, I actually don't like doing this. So like, why am I still doing this? I can just go over here and do something different. So I think the benefits of, you know, starting with templates, starting with kind of some smaller things to build it up and kind of figure out your space. And then when you're like, okay, no, I got this. Like, I know exactly what I want to do. Let me find someone who can like help do this. Cause it is that little bit of like, everyone has their own little space in the like creative world, and sometimes it's really hard to like jump back and forth between different aspects. And like, it'd be the same thing as being like, go paint a picture, and you're like, well, I can't paint, but like I can photograph. And that's, they're both creative and they're both an art form, but it's so hard to like switch your brain back and forth sometimes between it. So even some of the stuff with designing websites and, you know, working through that, you can be like, it just, something feels off, but I don't know what feels off and I don't know how to fix it. And like, now I'm spending all this time and I feel like I'm wasting time and it's still not, you know, where I want to be. So we definitely kind of see that frustration sometimes of like, I feel like it should look like this and I don't know how to actually get it to be where I need it to be.
Definitely. And I feel like it's good to go through the DIY, kind of like doing it yourself, figuring that out. Like you said, like your likes, dislikes, like what is really true for you as a brand, I think is so important. And in my case, I genuinely think that like having to do it myself, like with multiple websites, like two different ones I did with like a template and stuff like that, it truly made me value like actual people who do this like way more, because I'm like, wow, it really takes so much energy to do this. So yeah, like I'm glad I kind of went through that phase, but I was happy to be in this place now. But it takes time too.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is
Mhm.
something that like shouldn't be rushed, and should, I think, when you give yourself the time, especially early on, to kind of try things out and figure things out and, you know, work through things, it makes it so much easier when you get to this point because you feel way more solid in where you're standing and like what you're doing. And I think that's a big differentiating factor, is if you can really stand on it and be like, no, I know who I am, I know what I value, I know what I want my brand to stand for, I know who I want to work with. The rest of it just falls into place and it's like dominoes and it's so much easier. But if you're like, actually, I think I might want to completely change it, like it makes it a little more difficult. But yeah, it's so important to like give yourself that time and not feel rushed into it or feel like you have to go full in when you're not ready to. But then on the flip side, when you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm ready to do this, I know what I need, not delaying it so long that you'll get like frustrated with everything that you have because you're like, it's not working and like I don't know how to make it not feel like this anymore.
Definitely.
So now that your new brand and website is launched, I know it actually hasn't been up for too long, but how has it been? How are you feeling with it? What are you kind of seeing since everything kind of went live?
I love it. First of all, 10 out of 10, love it so much. I've gotten so many great feedback from either like friends, family, other photographers like in my area, like colleagues and stuff like that, being like, this looks so good. Like, so happy for you, so excited to see like kind of what comes next in your business. And I just feel more like confident too, like being able to market more, being able to be like, this is my new branding. Like, it feels so much more me. And overall, I feel like the response has been pretty great. I'm excited for like this branding to kind of like help me in the transition of like locating somewhere else. And then also just kind of stepping into like the next chapter of my business where navigating that move, but also feeling like more confident, more professional
Hmm.
in my own brand and stuff like that, which I think for a lot of people, like it takes time to feel, that confidence. And when you have such a pretty, beautiful, like well done kind of like exterior face, it's easier to feel confident because you're like, look, here's how professional I am. Go check it out. Go take a look, and it feels really good.
Yeah, I think there's this big thing when it comes to really having that confidence in your brand and how it looks and your website, in that you can just be like, okay, yeah, like I have a website, great. But then you feel so much better showing up everywhere because realistically, where are you leading people when you talk to them? Like you're leading them to your website, or you're like leading them to these spots. So if you're like, you can go here, but it doesn't feel good to you and it doesn't feel like it's a good representation of your brand and like who you are and what their experience is going to be working with you, when you go to send them, you're like almost second guessing yourself. So it feels, you have that kind of little like voice in the back of your head that's like, do I actually want to, like, how can I do this? how can I do this without sending them here? Or, are they going to have a different opinion when they actually get to my website and look through all this stuff? So I think having that branded website, yes, it gives you that good, you know, visual platform that people can see you on, but it also gives you so much more confidence when you are marketing, because you're like, okay, I know like everyone's going to have the same experience. It's not going to be a jump scare. I know that I'm sending people to somewhere that has a lot of information and it looks really good and it has everything that they need to know, and it, has clear ways to get in touch and look at my services or whatever it might be. So it gets rid of that little bit of doubt. And I feel like sometimes we don't realize how much that little bit of doubt is holding us back from like really doing everything that we want to do and like showing up in all the ways that we actually want to show up. But yeah, that little bit of confidence can really make a big difference. And I think too, like your clients feel it. I feel like sometimes you don't necessarily know when, things are like just going good and like it feels okay, and like there's nothing that they can really complain about. But then when you're showing up and they're like, wow, this is like a great experience, like that makes a difference. You like people can feel that, and they feel and see that difference. And like I feel like that's the where we can kind of get that separation from, just another photographer in this area to like someone who they're like, hands down, I'm going to work with you, like no question.
Definitely. Yeah, I think so too. I think that you feel it in more ways than just like your website and your branding, but you also feel it in the way that you are, being with clients and everything like that. So I think that that's another way that doing a refresh in your branding and stuff like that can really just make a difference in ways that you maybe don't think about.
It extends so much. Like realistically, your brand is like every single touch point you ever have with a client, whether it's like you in person or, anything that you're looking at with, your website or your proposals or, delivering galleries or like literally whatever it might be. So I think the more everything feels on the same playing field, the more, confident you feel, and that shows up in every part of your business.
Definitely.
Was there any part of the process that either surprised you or anything that you really loved about it?
I would say things that surprised me, or things that I really, really loved about working with you guys was that you were very clear about deadlines and deliverables, which for, somebody who maybe hasn't worked with a designer before, sometimes you're like, okay, what is this process exactly like? What's expected of me? What's expected of you? And to have that so clearly and very thoughtfully laid out as a client was so helpful. And knowing, okay, when am I going to receive things? When am I not going to receive things? Like how many times do I get to provide any feedback and things like that was so helpful. And I also, one thing that I love too about working with you guys is that you asked a lot of great questions. You asked great questions about, where do I see my business? What things am I struggling with? What things that, are related to the brand that you guys are wanting to create for me, and just asking good questions, asking for a mood board was so helpful because as photographers, I feel like we're very visually driven. You know what I mean? Like we know
Mm-hmm.
what we want when we see it kind of. And I feel like as a company, I feel like you guys really asked good questions that related to how I saw my brand, what I needed, and just were so concise and clear about it, which I loved.
Yeah, I know it sometimes feels like a lot to go through like our questionnaire and like answer all of these things and, sit down and really do it. But genuinely, those are the things that make a huge difference in creating a brand that is not something that just like looks good. Cause like we can create anything that looks good, but is it really going to connect with you and feel like you and connect with the people that you want to connect with? Like that is the overarching goal of what we're creating. And sometimes those questions that don't necessarily seem that like consequential and like these huge things, that can be the big difference. And like, okay, this is like the direction we need to go, and like this is what needs to get pulled in, or different elements that might work with the brand or anything like that. And it makes a huge difference. And even having that little bit of the Pinterest board and having that kind of direction. And like I said, y'all are creatives. Like you have a vision and it's your brand, and where you want it to go, and being able to see that and kind of see the general direction of where you kind of want to take things, and then be like, okay, so what can we do in this sense? Is there anything we can do to kind of step out of the box a little bit, or add any different things in here, or kind of work through this path? And having that baseline of like, here's the direction I want to go go for it, have fun, like see what comes out of it. But I think that's, that's a huge thing that makes a big difference in the whole process and in how we kind of build out the brand, is having that background information. Like it's so important to build something that really feels like you and has that personality. And like you said, like people look at it and they're like, this feels so cool and different. And like when your family looks at it and they're like, that's you, like that feels like what you would expect to see in person. Like that's the main goal, right?
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing too, if there's a photographer who maybe hasn't worked with a designer before and is going through it, it's like the questions that you ask also make you as a business owner kind of think about, okay, like where do I want to be? What are my goals and stuff like that. And just having an exercise, especially when you're like a solo entrepreneur, like you're just doing this alone, nobody else is helping you. Like it's good to have another sort of creative, like ask you these questions and for you to think about that too. And so you can kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, this is what I'm wanting to put out to the world. This is how I want my business like professionally to kind of look and stuff like that too.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to set aside time to really sit down and like ask these questions about your business. And especially in a time with rebranding, something is changing in your business. There's some reason that you wanted to switch this, so like it's a great time to kind of sit down and be like, okay, where do I see myself, where do I want this to go, how do I want my business to grow, who do I want to work with, all of these questions. And giving yourself dedicated time, and like you said, kind of a little guiding exercise to, really ask some of these questions, it helps on our end, but then I think it can help on the opposite side of giving you more clarity and kind of where you want to be and how you want to communicate with people, and what you want to say and how you want to put your business out there, which all works together to create a more unified experience for your clients, and an easier way of running your own business in a way that you feel confident about too.
Absolutely.
If anyone wants to check out your new brand and website, where can they find you online?
Yes, you could check out my new website, freshly done by Inkpot. Love it. AdrianaMayaPhotography.com. And you can also check me out on Instagram, Adriana Maya Photo. And I'm also on Pinterest. I believe the same username on Pinterest as Instagram. So Adriana Maya Photo. And yeah, looking forward to doing more weddings in Denver and going through this little relocation. So yeah,
Perfect. Well, we will put all of those links in the description below. Thank you again so much for coming on and talking about all of this. And we'll catch you in the next episode.
so thanks for having me.